So I am Methodist. I am a member of the Pacific Northwest Conference. I was appointed into Oregon, Idaho, and Ashland. We are all part of a greater Northwest area, which is really cool. And so much actually aligns Oregon and Washington that it's sort of a kind of good natural place to hang together. The work of creation justice, environmental justice, the attention to climate justice that we kind of really need in our faith communities, and it's just a really big learning curve, and it's happening fast. And so I'm just really glad to be here. So this work is urgent and important and in front of us and faithful. And so, all right. So I'm going to go ahead with the screen share. Now, obviously, our deadline is way earlier, but sometimes 2050 is a number to think of, because a lot of things will happen by 2050 if we don't, and that's not that far away. So just that's for clergy leaders kind of looking at the stakes, what's in front of us, and what's in front of us for our communities, right? As faith leaders, as church leaders, our communities are close to our heart. So food, water, shelter, energy. And I think it's always important to acknowledge that when when this whole thing started, fossil fuels, it was a joy. We had Beverly Hillbillies, right? You struck it rich. If you struck oil, you were rich. You had it made. You could feed your family. Sometimes it was as simple as that. You could feed your family. And it was a joyful time. Boy, there's stories, songs, ballads. There was a dark side, right? There were, even from the beginning, there was understood that this is got a lot of kind of dark side to it. But still, boy, did we ever celebrate um, the oil economy, what it could do for progress, how it would lift people out of poverty. People worked in the oil industry, oil and gas industry. It was an honorable job. People were proud to do it, proud to work there. And this is something that we need to remember. The Also, like, think of all the futuristic, how it really tied into our vision of America. So all these things are really important to think about as we talk about oil and gas, sort of that history for us, and how we have, how we're kind of dealing with what we already knew. By 1940, we knew that carbon would warm the earth. We knew it. We already knew a number of things about oil and gas that weren't as good, and we kind of just, you know, we went full steam ahead. And we're really just trying to catch up with it. Like, we got to talk about this more. So now I know y'all probably. So I realize folks know this, but sometimes it helps to just go over some of the basics. And so I have this, like, little basic group of slides I call the carbon buckets. And basically, what we're looking at here is, what are these buckets in the atmosphere of carbon? What do they look like? And so the atmospheric carbon from pre-industrial age, early modern human times, was about 595 gigatons. That's sort of, in general, an average that moved into growing things on the earth, like trees. And so we have, let me get that one. So there'd be trees growing and leafing, and all the things that absorb carbon, new little bodies born in the springtime. And then there would be things we would eat, right? So this is the carbon cycle. We eat them, they fill our bodies, we grow, we throw the apple core down, it rots. All of this moving around very naturally, normally, in a balanced way in our atmosphere with carbon. And so what happened then was humans started burning fossil fuels. This is carbon that is stored on the planet, but not in the atmosphere. And so what we have done since 1850 is we have produced 2,500 gigatons of carbon since 1850. Now, not all of that goes into the atmosphere, as we'll see. A lot of it is absorbed by the ocean. praise God for our oceans, but that causes its own problem, ocean acidification, and things like that, which we'll talk about as well. But that's a lot. That's a lot added to our atmosphere, really pulling it out of balance. It's added about 305 gigatons of CO2 to the atmosphere, however. So now we've got all this extra carbon in the atmosphere, and it's, as you can see, overflowing our bucket. So we're going to scooch that over, our atmospheric number over, to make room, because we're going to make more buckets. Another thing to know about is our permafrost, and we know about this, right? We've got carbon in the permafrost, a couple of estimates, 1,600, 1,500 gigatons under the ice. So this gets frozen and saved, right? So it's not in the atmosphere, and underneath Arctic ice, fresh ice, Antarctic ice, anywhere where we've got soil covered with snow or ice, and lakes covered with snow and ice. And that's, but this in particular is just permafrost. We're looking at permafrost. So permafrost is great because it holds it all, right? It's like ice cream in your freezer. As long as it's in your freezer, it's going to stay ice cream. But the minute you take it out of the freezer and you let it melt, right, it's going to make a mess. It's going to get everywhere. And the same thing with carbon. So let's move that bucket over a little bit, make a little more room. And this is a fossil fuel bucket, which is, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot, right? So we have something like 3,000 gigatons of, this was a 2012 number from Carbon Brief. And this number may have shifted a little here or there, but basically these are oil and gas and coal reserves. So these are things counted on the books of places like Chevron and BP, making them profitable. You can invest in us because we've got all these reserves that we're going to pull out of the ground and burn, and it's going to go into the air and the ocean and the soil and all these other places that carbon, throwing the carbon cycle off balance. And the reality is we can't do that, right? It's like, how do we yeah, this is a lot of carbon, and look at our little atmospheric bucket over here. It's just we just can't do it. We just can't. We have to, in fact, get back to our balance, which will mean not only stopping burning fossil fuels like today, yesterday, 10 years ago, but drawing down as much as we can. So it's really important next step work. So most people don't argue about mega drought anymore. Like I said, it used to be in 2018, 2016. I'd tell people, like, I know you can't see it out your window, but climate change is really everywhere, and it's changing everything. And now I don't have to say that because you look out your window and you can see it too. One of the things of the heat rising and the droughts coming, one of the ways people kind of talk back to that is they'll say, well, look, there's always been variation in the system. But these are the trajectories, and we need to take them seriously. And sometimes people will look at that 1930 number and say, oh, but look at that spike there. It's always been variable. We're just in a higher time. Well, I want to kind of mention that was the Dust Bowl. So this isn't anything we want to aspire to in Oregon, right? That's not where we want to be. Those temperature anomalies are supposed to be like every 1,000 years or something like that. And that's where they need to stay. Yeah, the Dust Bowl was bad. So what are we looking at in Oregon? So we have things like atmospheric rivers coming in, right? We have mega droughts. We have bomb cyclones, all this new language, all this new shared, we got to share this language too. And that's going to come in the forms of things like sea level rise and storm surge and warmer temperatures, warmer oceans, extreme weather, wildfires, erosion, our reduced snowpack, flooding, drought. We know all this now, right? Our infrastructure is not built for this climate. It's not built for the climate of 2030, 2035, 2040. It's not built for any of that. And so the infrastructure bill not only would help us repair what we've got, but we must do that repair in preparation for the reality of what 2040 is going to be like. So this, again, some of these slides are older. This is 2015. We have a constant El Nino. Seems like at this point we've just had one. We're going to have another one. And Oregon has, narrow roads. One road leads you out this way and one road leads you out that way. And there are people all along the way, people, species, forests. And if you can't get food, if you can't get that truck to Fred Meyer, you're gonna need help and support. So we have to think of ways, really strategize to make sure that we're meeting the needs of people, and in different parts of Oregon. So again, y'all know about these droughts and how bad they've been, the mega drought. What are we going to call it in 5 years? The mega drought. I mean, we're running out of names here. Testimony from foresters who see the trees dying. This was from my Washington slides, dead and drying hemlocks, but it's the same here. I'm in Southern Oregon. It's kind of heartbreaking. And then all these ways that climate change, so water, aquaculture changes and species changes, things bloom at different times, the soil composition changes, species have to change, things are moving away from the warmer southern areas, coming north all the time, further north, which is kind of nutty because even now in Canada, right, and in the Arctic, we've got high temperatures. It was 122 in parts of British Columbia, something like that. And this is climate change. So we have fundamental changes, and we're gonna really need to be thinking about how we deal with those. Such high species, the Western forests have been an absolute treasure, a divine treasure. And it's not too late to take steps to mitigate, and we must stop burning fossil fuels. Also fire risk, we know this, right? Everything gets dry, things get bitten by beetles. And this is true, not just Western forests. We think about Western forest fires, but this is true in New Hampshire as well. Forests are drying out, species no longer match the climate that they're in, and everything's on the move. And more beetles. Again, more and more wildfires. This is a 2019 statistics. So yeah, pulling out those. So yeah, lots of wildfires. We know that. I live in Ashland. I was in Talent during the Alameda wildfire. It was hard, and I have a whole slideshow about that. I could share if you're interested. This is permafrost again. And look, so you see how, so permafrost is melting, right? So this is falling over even, but look at how the snow is black in there. So a nice white layer of fresh snow reflects the sun, and it won't absorb the heat, and that helps shoot that heat energy right back out into space. Well, in this, you see that you've got warming, you've got microbes, soils, all sort of living now in this ice, and it's turning it black, and black does not reflect light. Black absorbs it. So this is a double whammy in places where there's permafrost. So not only is that light coming down, but it's now being absorbed. And not only is it warmer, but it's warming up. So this is what we call tipping point. So when we start talking about tipping points, this is what that looks like, fundamentally changing the ecology of places on Earth. Sea level rise again. This is I think this might be a 2018 number. That's something that on the East Coast they're going to deal with even more desperately, but here we're going to be dealing with it as well. Species loss. And Oregon is a wildlife state, right? We just love our beautiful forests and our beautiful fish. And we have a lot of the economy. We've had to close fisheries. We need our cool water. We need our snowpack. That's how it all works. That's our ecology. And we talk a lot about the hot blob, right? This year in Florida, the hot ocean waters, but there's been a hot blob off the Pacific for a number of years. So I don't know about this year and next year. I probably should have looked that up, but this is a big blob of hot water that is changing fish migration. They have to go around it or through it, or different fish can live in it. And it's not great for salmon because salmon don't like warm water. Then remember how I talked about how the oceans were absorbing the carbon from that big carbon bucket of fossil fuels? Well, this is what happens is you get Dungeness crab, which is delicious, and something that Oregon can be. We were just in Bandon, and my grandson got to see crabs. But the shells, sea life is absolutely impacted by these warm waters, by these acidic waters, and it this touches everything. So the economy of the place, the people of the place, the species of the place, food production, and this is just a really sad, this was from 2019, and the tribes have been working really hard. Washington State Ecology, with them trying to make this number not what it is. But this is the quote: "The Columbia River was once the most productive wild Chinook habitat in the world, but now these fish have maybe 4 generations left before they are gone, maybe 20 years. I mean, we've closed fishing seasons, and boy, this one hurts my heart. Yeah, do no harm. So we're already warmed. This again is an older number, 2016. So we're already warming. And we really helpful tip from the World Health Organization: keep out of the heat, which is really hard to do when it's 122 degrees. It was 119 degrees, tied for top records at Pelton Dam in 2021, that heat dome. And again, if you look only at the spike, you can say, well, in 1898 in Pendleton, it was 119 was measured as that. Okay, maybe it was. That's a one-time event. Well, we're looking at if that's a 1,000-year event, how come it happened 100 years later? Also, when you have warming nights and you have continual hot temperatures, and those hot temperatures start earlier, and you're not getting rainfall because everything is thirstier when it's warm, that's what we call, again, these sort of cascading effects. And there's been a lot of effort to prove that it's caused by climate change, right? That it's naturally variable, but this wouldn't happen without climate change. And that's over the last year been a really important way of talking about some of these things. So this was part of my originally, 2050, what do we see this coming? I'm just going to move that. We know food, water, we know all this is going to be impacted. Shelter, really, really challenging one. 2018 number, 101.2 million people in the United States were displaced by natural disasters. So some of them were able to return to their homes, some of them not. Example of not would be some of these big fires. This is the Paradise, California fire. And if you want to really, really lift up prayers for folks, that's still a trauma-inducing event. 50,000 people were displaced, and something like 13,000 of them never had forwarding addresses lodged with the post office. And they just left, and wherever they could go. That's a sadder kind of thing. For floods and things, people tend to maybe stay more local, or they look for other places, but there can be something called gentrification. So the ribbon near the sea or the river, that was really a top dollar, right? And then the poorer people who had less, they lived, a few streets up. And as the wealthier people have to move because of climate change, they're buying those homes. And now the folks who live there can't afford them. So everybody's being pushed out. The vulnerable are being pushed out. So those with privilege, of course, are doing better. But we have to deal with the fact that poverty is real, not just in the world, but in Oregon, in this country. 43% of the population is poor or low income. I think this is a 2016 number, might be 2018. 51% of all children are poor or low income, and this is from the Cairo Center. This is I'm not sure how this happens in the US. Again, we have to deal with energy. Wind power does a lot of good. So I know that we have to pay attention, right? Can't be just more extractional economics, right? That's not gospel economics. We need some gospel economics. But wind power is definitely, it's possible. It's a lot better. It can be deployed. We have to do that. So food, water, shelter, energy, and something that I call just righteousness. I think sometimes when we polarize, the people on the quote unquote right, they want to use the word righteousness, and the people on the quote unquote left want to use the word justice. But guess what? In the Greek Bible, they are the same word. Jesus uses the word that is, it's the same word for both. It's not a different word. We're just pulling out two different aspects of meaning from it. And we can practice just righteousness together. And that includes looking at things like environmental racism, intergenerational equity, right? We're like stealing from our children at this point. Indigenous peoples, right? The consumptive extraction in order to maintain economy, right? We got to look at that and say, how do we do that better in community so that everybody has enough? So this is the IRA. I have, again, another whole, I can send links. But the IRA, the bill that is addressing climate justice, has some very specific language in there about climate justice, including the environmental and energy justice, thriving community technical assistance centers. And boy, I love to name things. They're almost as bad as Methodists. But it's trying to say what it is. It's offering help and support and trying to jumpstart, infuse into our efforts, fund people. And there's the Justice 40 initiative gives extra money to places that are identified as low income justice areas, environmental justice areas. This map is not Oregon, but you'll see that this is a state, I forget which one. And it's you'll see the sort of gray blue blocks. Those are environmental justice areas identified as having stressors or extra burden. And look at all the churches. Every one of those little gold squares is a church. So wow, like this is our moment further toward 20th century moment, 21st century moment. This is our work. Think what we could do. So things like solar, I'm just going to go through these quickly. We know, but there's lots of rebates, incentives, direct pay coming through. The IPL can help with that. IPL is working really hard on this. Here's a great story. I didn't really go into this during the meeting, but I guess I've given myself a little extra time here. But the Baltimore Washington Conference of the United Methodist Church, they're going to install EV charging stations. So they're partnering with an energy provider who is itself benefiting from the IRA bill, and they're going to get charging stations in church parking lots. So this is kind of, the church is lagging. We're behind. So we need to listen to others. We need to kind of get help and see where things are moving and say, hey, we'd like to go to help out. We'd like to come alongside that. And when we come alongside something, what we're bringing the voice of justice, right? We're bringing the voice of like, do this in a good way. How do we do this in a way that uplifts communities, not just today? How do we do this that doesn't just put money in the pocket so people can eat and pay their rent, but their children can, and their children can too? How do we do that? As a big win for churches right off the bat could be helping parents get electrified school buses. This is a big push for many parents. Air quality, asthma, illnesses. I mean, that's a whole nother 2 hours conversation. This is Mom's Clean Air Force. They're out there lobbying to get those buses. We must achieve net zero emissions before 2050. This is also an old number. Everything's happening faster, including the good stuff, but the bad stuff too. We have to do better than we're doing. We have a decade. So, and it's going to be hard. We got stuff that's baked in, right? It's just those tipping points are just going to start unrolling. But God has not left the building. This is lovely. I had to stop in Eastern Oregon and take a bunch of pictures of this great old church and imagine all the folks who sung hymns there. We must prepare our communities. We can save lives, food, water, shelter, energy, just righteousness, because we are blessed. We are good. God said, I will bless you richly, as many as grains on sand and the seashore. Generations that we got all this ahead of us. Let's live into it. Let's be gospel people. And I'm going to stop sharing. So there's more that we talked about, and I kind of went on more with this particular. So I hope you're patient, and apologies for taking more time, but I am just so available if you have questions or concerns or curious. Oregon Interfaith Power and Light. We're shifting staff people, so that's a little bit in flux. But boy, I'll tell you, IPL really wants to be there for churches and do some things to make this more affordable. We have a interfaith solar campaign. Um, and just figuring out how we can be communities, what we can do for each other, with each other, alongside each other, and so it's possible we can do this. Not too late. In fact, it's we are. I think I said, we talk about how we're a resurrection people, but I'm not sure I like that as much. We're not dead yet. That's like Jesus's territory. We're not dead yet. We're not. We don't have to be resurrection people yet. We are restoration people. That is where we are right now, repair and restoration. And we are a restoration people, and we can do so much. We really can. So, anyway, that's my pitch. And thank you again for inviting me. Yeah, thank you. All right. Okay, I'm going to end this now. Many blessings to you.